Good morning and welcome to Rising. We have a great show for you all today. Emily Jashinsky is here. Robbie's still on his road trip, but the reason Emily insisted on coming in today is because she did not want to miss the opportunity to weigh in on the great Finnish Prime Minister clubbing story.
I had to be here. There was no option.
It's too good. It's too good. We promise we will get to that.
Yes. No, we can't resist. And Kim Iverson, of course, is here with us as well. And then Team Rising is here to discuss some of the concerns over two GOP members of Congress making headlines over their gun-filled, awesome Christmas photos. I'll just add that. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will also join us to discuss President Biden's Democracy Summit and what he's hoping will come out of this virtual gathering today.
But first, the Senate on Wednesday voted to block President Biden's vaccine mandate for private employers. Democratic Senators Jon Tester and Joe Manchin voted with Republicans, sending the bill now to the House. The vote marks the first time Republicans have been able to use the Congressional Review Act to successfully pass a resolution that blocks a Biden rule through the Senate. And when you have a 50-50 Senate, that means that this Congressional Review Act, which basically allows Congress to block any White House rule if it was passed within a certain number of calendar days. So basically anything that Biden has done can be kind of vetoed by Congress. That's the essence of that law. And now the House will have to see if they can do it. It's unlikely that it has to come up for a vote. So whether they can get a couple of rural populists like Jared Golden, to go along with them would be the difference between whether or not the House can shoot this down. But you got a couple rural Democrats, Jon Tester and Joe Manchin, to side with Republicans to block the mandate. It shows kind of the salience of this issue, particularly in rural areas, West Virginia and Montana. Were you surprised that there was finally a break in the kind of partisan divide here? Because as much as everybody complains about Joe Manchin from the Democratic side, he consistently votes with Democrats on judges and nominations and American Rescue Plan and on and on. So this was a significant break, plus with Jon Tester in Montana.
I was going to say, Jon Tester actually does the same thing for the most part. Both of them are
Except he's not as loud about it anymore.
Exactly, right. But both of them are pretty reliable votes for Democrats. So yes, I absolutely actually was surprised by that. I've actually been surprised in the sort of Trump era since 2015, 2016, how consistently those rural Democrats have stuck with party leadership. But then to your point, it does show the salience, particularly of vaccine mandates and that issue in those areas. But there have been a lot of those similar issues that are sort of culturally hot button issues, and they've stuck with Democratic leadership. So this is a big break, and I think it does underscore, to your point, how important that issue particularly is to so many people.
Yeah. One interesting vote on this was Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire, because she's up for a very tough re-election in New Hampshire, which is heavily rural state, libertarian state, lots of hostility towards the mandate. And her vote was meaningless since it was going to pass anyway. And so she could have done the pandering thing, voted with Republicans, but didn't. So it seems like she's going for a kind of base voter, get the Democrats out on her side in 2022 strategy. Angus King maybe was the only other one that you could potentially see as, from Maine as on the fence, but he didn't seem to waver at all on it. Do you think this hurts Maggie Hassan in New Hampshire? Or do you think it helps to get kind of Democrats? Because for Democrats, this is an issue where it's like, wait, are you crazy? You can't be on the other side of this.
Yeah, right. And that's what makes, I think, Tester and Manchin's votes surprising, although I'm sure leadership understood why they took those votes. But for Maggie Hassan, it's interesting, and I think you just raised a really good point about Angus King and Maggie Hassan, because it's one of those things where it's sort of the catch-22, damned if you do, damned if you don't, because it is so important to Democratic leadership. It's become such an important litmus test. Now, yesterday, Pfizer and BioNTech said a booster jab of the vaccine promises to be an effective defense against the new Omicron variant, according to a small study conducted by the company. But the CEO of Pfizer, Albert Bourla, also warned that people may even need a fourth shot sooner than expected, after their preliminary research shows Omicron can undermine protective antibodies generated by the vaccine. Ryan, what do you think about that?
Well, don't we need to know a little bit more about Omicron before we talk about a fourth booster?
Yes.
You had this funny interview from the Pfizer CEO where he was like, yes, it does appear milder, but that could be bad. And in his mind, you can see him thinking that's bad because it's harder for me to convince people to get more, get more shots.
More Pfizer.
But his argument was, and non-profit-driven people, could say the same thing, which is that as the more it spreads, then the more likelihood it has to mutate and potentially to turn into something much more monstrous. The tendency of these viruses, evolutionarily, is toward milder outcomes, because that's what helps them. Their goal is not to kill you. Their goal is to replicate themselves and move from you to another human host. And so killing you is actually counterproductive to that strategy of theirs. So that's why the evolutionary process pushes viruses to become more and more mild. The ideal virus you'd barely know you have it, because it's not just killing you. If it creates enough symptoms that you're aware that you have it,
you kill it.
You kill it, and you also stay home and stay away from other people. The virus can't think that, but the math around the virus understands that if it is too damaging to people, then those hosts, stop going out into crowded areas, unless they're freedom-loving people who believe it is, that's their patriotic duty.
Yes.
To go maskless out into a crowd, because otherwise the virus wins. Actually, that's how the virus wins, but that's a whole other point. Boris Johnson over in the UK is now launching what he's calling a Plan B for England. Sounds a lot like a Plan A being redone, with the introduction of its COVID passports for large venues and guidance to go working from home again. The restrictions have come in response to the spread of Omicron.
So meanwhile, Finland's prime minister was taking a slightly different approach to COVID than Boris Johnson. Sanna Marin went out clubbing in Helsinki on Saturday, hours after her foreign minister had tested positive. So she was initially told, because of her vaccination, she didn't need to quarantine, until her advisor texted her to do so while she was out. But the 36-year-old PM got tested, she came back negative, and has since apologized, saying, quote, "I'm very sorry for not understanding that I needed to do that." She has nothing to apologize. Never apologize for clubbing.
And a couple key
That's what Ryan always says.
That's right.
He always says, never apologize for clubbing. And I say, Ryan, you're right.
A couple great details there. She was out till 4 a.m. In Helsinki clubbing. And she didn't have her work phone with her. So it's not that she went to the club without her phone, but she went without her work phone.
Living her best life.
Living her best life. And so, she's apologizing for not, I guess, getting the message, not understanding that she ought to quarantine. But like you said, it's a different approach.
Slightly different.
Than a lot of other places are taking. And, I think the Finnish type of approach, to take it seriously, test, get vaccinated, contact trace, but continue to live your life, seems to be actually the most rational approach, which is why I would expect that that's what they're doing in Finland. How much political pain is there going to be for this?
Well, I'm not sort of intimately familiar with the nuances of Finnish politics.
Well, let's just make generalizations based on the stereotypes of Finnish people.
Yes, let's do that. So I think, she'll be okay. I think she'll make it.
Yes.
No, but I mean, it is, to your point, there is a sort of there's something about that it's in a way pretty refreshing that she did what was right when she figured out what was right, but she was living her life.
And she tested negative?
She tested negative, but I also do love the idea that the 36-year-old prime minister of Finland is at a club at 3 in the morning. Yeah, until 4 in the morning.
And what day was this? Tuesday?
Oh man, I hope it was a
Wednesday.
But
4
anyway,
a.m. at the club on Wednesday?
Is that not where you are?
That's not where I am. No, I'm sleeping through the conference call at that point.
Yes, that's right. He did do that again this morning. Well, anyway, I say good for her. Some of these guidelines are difficult to keep track of. Even world leaders can mess it up if they are just trying to let off some steam and go to the club without their work phone. So I think it's fine.
And if you look at the ages of the rest of her cabinet,
yes,
I think they were probably having a cabinet meeting at the club. So this was official business.
Yes.
So leave her alone.
Good for them.
Doing the Finnish people's business. And we'll tell you what's on our radar up next.